r/AskReddit, what is one memory that never fails to make you smile every time you think about it? My mom found out she had stage 4 lung cancer when I was 2 and passed away when I was 6. When she got diagnosed, she was given 6 months to live, so needless to say, she gave us lots of amazing memories and really lived in the moment. The one story I always tell when talking about my mom was how one day she let me and my older sister stay home, which was a big deal in 1st and 3rd grade already. We went to Bulk Barn and got every item we wanted. When we got home, we snuggled in my parents' bed, spread out what felt like a never-ending amount of bags of chocolate/candy, and watched Disney movies all afternoon. When my dad came home from work, he just jumped right in and joined us. It was right before she went into hospice and the last good day I remember her having before she passed, so the memory holds a special place in my heart. Sounds like your mom was awesome. Reminds me of how I got my cat, the love of my life. I was 15 and at the house of my ex-BF. Suddenly my mom calls me and says I need to come home. She has a present for me. We were really tight with money after she left my father, so I wondered about the whole situation. TBH, I really hoped for a Big Nick and Caramel Mayo. We went to my home and she had her best friend and my sister over and had cleaned my room. She said sit down, close your eyes, and hold your hands open. I did, and she slipped something in my hands. I opened the eyes and there was this little black fur ball staring and purring at me. My mom was allergic to cats and we had a dog, so I never ever thought about having a cat. To bring this story on end, my mother got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 8 months later and died after 6 months. My sister and me really think she knew it when I got the cat. There was no reason to give me a baby cat only because of the splitting with my father? No way. My black fur ball just had his 10th birthday and I love him more than everything. This made me cry. Thank you for sharing your beautiful moment. I'm so sorry for your loss. About a year ago, was in a discount grocery store. I had about $20 left after bills and rent, so was having to carefully pick what to buy. In the end, after umming and ahhing for a couple of minutes over whether I could afford to spend $6 on coffee, I put it back on the shelf and went to the register. As I'm walking out of the shop, I hear a woman call after me, "Young man, you forgot this." I turn around and she thrusts the jar of coffee into my bag. I go to protest and she cuts me off saying, "I remember what it was like not having enough money and having to go without. You take that coffee and enjoy it, mate." The biggest smile on her face. She was like a beacon of light during one of my darkest times, and I always remember her. With every cup of coffee I can't help but smile. Because now each cup reminds me there are truly good people in the world. Edit. Never thought much of Reddit karma, but am surprised and very appreciative to have gotten 8k upvotes and guild for this story. But more so for seeing how people have responded. I'm glad my story has cheered and helped so many of you. I dedicate this, by far my highest voted post, to Margaret, if by some chance you're reading this. Thank you again for the coffee, and I hope you are well. I've paid forward your kind deed several times since then, and hope in some way it has circled back to you. I sometimes wonder if you know just how much impact you made on me and my outlook on life that day. Also, fixed spelling. Always remember there are good and kind people out there. Don't let a few bad apples ruin humanity for you. For years I did, and I've only recently learned this lesson. If you take anything away from this post, let it be that. This reminds me of a story. My son got pneumonia when he was 5. He was in the hospital for 4 days and they finally sent us home with $400 worth of prescriptions. His Medicaid had gotten messed up somehow, and turns out he was uninsured. We were broke AF at the time and had just paid the mortgage, so $400 wasn't in the cards. I had about $250 to my name. I drove around to different pharmacies trying to see if it was cheaper. About the 8th pharmacy I went to, the pharmacist said, "Let me check the price," went in the back and handed me the prescriptions and just smiled. I tried to ask how much they cost and he just kept smiling. I'll never forget that guy. I'm a 6 feet 3 inches 250-pound construction worker and I cried all the way home. I'm by no means wealth, uni student myself, but buying someone something like that makes me incredibly happy. It's such a nice feeling knowing you had a positive, albeit little, impact on someone's day. Bike tours with grandpa. He sure was the son. I'm waiting for you/grandpa to come and say back, quote, "Here comes the sun." When my friend got hit in the face with a piece of broccoli at a hibachi restaurant. This made me remember that for my birthday one year I went to a restaurant called Donwa in Montreal with my sister and some friends. The wait staff is people who are blind, and you eat in the dark. My sister managed to throw a mushroom at me and hit me right in the middle of my forehead. Of course I threw one back, but in the dark I missed and could not tell where it went. About 5 minutes later we just hear, "There's something slimy on my chair," from someone who had just been seated. We about died laughing. Also being sung happy birthday in complete darkness takes all the awkwardness out of it. No one staring at you, and you don't have to look at anyone/anything. Not to crap on everyone's beautiful stories on this thread, but there's something really hilarious about this slapstick moment. It's like my firstborn's first steps, my wedding, my dog's puppies, and then, hairy broccoli face. My daughter was born in July. The following fall she often would cry at night. I would wrap her in a blanket and take her for a walk. Moments after we got into the cool fall air, she would fall asleep, but I would make the walk last as long as I could. Now every fall when the first cool evening hits I smile and often take a walk. Edit, she's now 38. Close bracket. Kind of a similar experience with me. My daughter would often suffer from colic as a baby, and despite the meds, most times she would keep on wailing. Once I discovered that she would immediately calm down if I lay down with her in my arms in the empty bathtub. It became a ritual. We don't have a house with a bathtub now, and my baby's grown too. But whenever I see a pic of a cozy bathroom tub, I can't help but smile, remembering the sense of comfort she felt. The thought of our children sleeping without pain or worry are precious to a parent. P.S. My daughter was born in July as well. Any memory with my grandpa? Well, he technically isn't my real grandpa, but he's who I grew up with my whole life. The man was hardworking, loving, funny, and every positive aspect you'd ever want in a grandpa. But there's one memory that stands out. 6 years ago, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, and Alzheimer's. They weren't diagnosed together, but he took those diseases to the grave. It was too much for him to be awake during all of it, so they medically induced a coma that he never woke up from. Throughout all of it, he never moved a muscle. The quiet sounds of his breathing were all we heard. At one point, my sister was by his side in tears, like the rest of us. Out of nowhere, he reached up with his arm and gave my sister a hug. No one else got any actions from him, not even my grandma. It's a memory none of us will forget. Especially not my sister. He died on March 4th, 2014, and our family gets together for ice cream on that date, along with his birthday, to celebrate his life. He didn't deserve the pain he went through one bit, but I have no doubt that his loved ones greeted him with a smile when it was all over. I love you, Grandpa. Edit. Wow. Almost 1,000 upvotes. Thanks for all the support. I wasn't even expecting it. Thinking about my cat, Cricket, and how he loved hanging out with me in my garage, like he was my assistant working on the car, or sat with me during rainstorms. He was so much fun. I love Cricket's name. Also I love Cricket. He seems pretty great. I got to spend an entire week staying with my grandmother once, when I was a child. That week was the best, since I love my grandmother. We would scrapbook, sew, bake cookies, and do puzzles together. I was so happy to be able to spend time with her like that. She was my favorite person in the world. I loved my grandmother so much that when I was a little kid, what I wanted to be when I grew up was a grandmother. She's no longer alive, so I'm relearning how to sew during the quarantine, and I'm going to make a quilt with some of her old quilt blocks. I can relate so much to this. I had a pretty lonely childhood, no siblings, no kids my age living nearby, the few friends that I had all lived a couple of miles away, parents worked full time, and so I usually had to keep myself entertained. Sporadically, I used to spend the night at my grandma's place whenever my parents had to go to some place late at night, and I always loved it because she was always up to do things together with me, so I didn't have to keep myself entertained. Then at some point, I heard that my cousins stayed an entire week at their grandparents' place just for fun. This may sound weird, but up until that point, I didn't know that that was a thing that other kids sometimes did. So of course I wanted to do that as well, and so I did. It was just so much fun, and later I did it again a few times. I did arts and crafts, story time, etc. as a volunteer at the children's hospital. Definitely when my favorite kid found a bone marrow donor. They have a large golden bell at the front of the ward that kids ring when they finish chemotherapy. She hadn't finished yet, but she just went up to the bell and karate chopped it. I drunkenly signed up as a bone marrow donor last night. I secretly really hope it works out and I actually help someone. The first time my daughter spoke an intelligible word. She woke up in the morning and looking at me said, "Papa." The funny part is that my wife had, according to her, the perfect plan. She would say, repeatedly, to the baby, the word "Papa." Then, supposedly, when the baby would need anything she would call me and not my wife. It worked until a certain point. Now she's jealous that the first word was "Papa." But, when the baby wants something she calls for her mommy, most of the times. Lol, I like her plan. I did the same with our first. Secretly repeated "Dada" to him every chance I got. Seeing the happiness light up my husband when the first word out of his beloved son's mouth was his name was absolutely worth it. My mom would sing and dance in the kitchen every Sunday morning when I was growing up. Times were always tough and money was always tight, but my mom always made sure we were happy and healthy. One particular day, when I was 8, I was woken up by the sound of Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive" blasting through the house and my mom singing off key. As I walked to the kitchen, the smell of chorizo and eggs filled the air, and there I saw her, my mom, who only a few days earlier looked so miserable with her life, was dancing her heart out with a spatula in hand. When she passed away 7 years later, I cried every time I thought of her, except for this memory. This is the only memory that got me through her death. It not only makes me smile every time I think of it, but it's my favorite memory of all time, because I'm so lucky to remember her for who she was. Edit. I was given the Gold Award. Thank you so much, kind stranger. It's my first. And wow, this is getting a lot of upvotes too. Thank you all. You were 15 when she passed? Oh honey, I'm sorry. I'm glad you have great memories of her. Hold on dearly to them. They will get you through life's miseries too. I think I found a tradition I'll definitely make when I have kids. Feel hugged. This reminded me of a video I have of my dad, who passed away almost 3 years ago when I was 21. He was a huge goofball and would sometimes sing in this crazy falsetto voice for laughs. It was during the summer. I was about to move 4 hours away to start college, and my sibling was going to move 2 hours away with my mom for their last year of high school. He decided to have a sort of cheers to new adventure ceremony, and as a preamble to this, before he called us to the kitchen, he started blasting the theme from 2001: A Space Odyssey and singing along in that crazy falsetto voice like boo-hoo-up, boo-hoo-up, b-u-h-h boo-hoo-up. I was sitting in the living room with no idea what was going on and started recording on my phone. I just watched it again and it still makes me laugh. It was just such a him thing to do. I miss him so much. The last afternoon I spent with my grandma. She was such a firecracker, always joking around and giving people the bird. We had a great time, just the two of us. She passed away in September 2019, about 2 months after her husband. I miss them both, but thinking about that last afternoon with her always makes me smile. That sounds so nice. My grandma passed away Tuesday, and I was unable to go tell her bye or anything because of virus. It made the funeral very frustrating not being able to hug anyone. Edit. Thank you all for your support. I genuinely appreciate it. One time my brother said something funny while I was eating cereal, and I had a huge mouthful of unchewed mini wheats and milk and I started to laugh, but then my sister said something funnier, and then I thought of the most epic funny thing to say, but I was trapped in the state of laughter / trying not to spit out or choke on my food. Which actually made me laugh even harder because of the situation I was in. Then my brother looks at me like WTF is wrong with you, and I just point at him, and then my sister, and then myself, and it was so stupid, and I just fell to the floor crying with laughter. I can almost see you crying and rolling around still crunching. Made me chuckle, thanks. I have been you in scenarios like this so many times and I love it. My first time coming home from college. I was worried my dog would forget me while I was gone. But when I walked through the door, she lost her shit. I've never felt so loved and relieved. Dogs never forget. I've told this story on here before, but I used to work for a landscaping company cutting grass in industrial parks. One day I was cutting a huge piece of lawn after a light rain and stirred up a bunch of bugs. Some swallows must have noticed and went on a sort of feeding frenzy all around me for like 1/2 hour. I would be riding along and a bird would swoop what felt like inches from my head and then spiral all around to catch more bugs. After watching them for a minute or so I knew they wouldn't crash into me, so it was like being given a private air show. They called you the Swallow Man. African or European? Very cool. I've had this happen to. It's amazing to see the control and precision they have. When my sister was on my iPad, we were FaceTiming. My baby brother came into my room, saw my sister, and kissed my iPad. I didn't read this right and thought that your baby brother loves your iPad more than your sister. That's so sweet. Me and my friends sitting around talking and laughing for one of the last times before university ended, and we all got split up. Shit. This semester would have been my last at university, and I'm unlikely to do my masters in the same place. Now virus happened, and I'm not gonna get this precious memory and that gets to me. My dad was retired military point. When I was pregnant with my son, he came to stay at my house near my due date. Things start happening and off we go to the hospital, my husband driving me in his car, and my brother and dad following in their car. I had a truly horrible and very long contraction right before we got to the hospital. So my husband calls my dad to tell him the new plan. He was going to grab a wheelchair for me, and then my dad was going to take me in to get admitted while the other two parked the cars. So we get out of the cars, and I'm sobbing, leaning on my dad while waiting for the wheelchair. He asks me if I'm okay, I think just as a reflex. Obviously I say no. I can barely focus through the pain and this is not a light, delicate tear slowly rolling down my cheek. Situation point, so the wheelchair comes, and I get in it. My dad starts pushing and hauls ass through the doors, where I see there is a line of people waiting to check in at the front desk. Dad doesn't even attempt to wait in line. He goes directly to the side of the desk as fast as he can push my fully pregnant self. Point, he doesn't look like he's planning on stopping for the little old lady who's being helped, so I put my feet out to stop the wheelchair and prevent her from being hit. Luckily she doesn't take very long and my dad soon pushes me up a little further to talk to the woman behind the desk. Hi, yeah, my daughter is in labor. She needs to be checked in right away. Okay sir, we can do that. We just need some ID from you now at this point. He's behind me, so I can't see him, but the contraction is finally starting to subside, so I'm calming down a little bit. But I can hear the disgust dripping from his voice when he says she's about to have a baby and you're worried about my ID. She tells him yes, she doesn't need anything from me, but she does need to make a quick ID sticker for him. So logically the next thing he says is okay fine, here's my driver's license, military ID, credit cards, what else do you need? Can we go now? While emptying his entire wallet and tossing random cards on the desk. My dad was a career military man and I have rarely seen him lose his cool. But the memory of him losing his crap and trying to help while I was in pain always makes me smile. He died recently and I really miss him. This was such a beautiful story. I'm so sorry for your loss and I know that doesn't ever really make it too much better, but I did want to thank you for sharing this. It put a smile on my face. I love your dad. He sounds like an amazing person. I'm so sorry for your loss. He sounds like he was an awesome dad. I'm former military, so much respect for your father. My brother and I went to the dollar store one day and went through every aisle and put anything in the cart that we thought was cool. We kinda messed around and ended up putting away 80% of it. But I don't hang out one-on-one with him much, so it made me happy. This is cute. Reminds me, of my oldest brother, 11.5 years older than me. He basically raised us while our mom worked all the time, and as siblings we only showed that we cared about one another by beating the crap out of each other, but never letting anyone else put their hands on our brother/sisters. Anyways, I was 18 and our sister was getting married. I was sitting at a table with him and pouring us both champagne, just rambling about how I had never tried champagne before and it was freaking delicious. Out of nowhere, he just said, "I love you," yeah, as if he was telling me, but also asking if I knew it. That's so cool. I understand what you mean. I was never close to my brothers, but one day I went to the hospital and they were so worried sick that one of them couldn't focus at work and divided his salary by 3. He works in sales, so his performance actually affects his salary. Ever since we have like an invisible bond we don't talk about. My other brother even comes to my house from times to fix stuff I don't know how. It's kind of our one-on-one moment. I guess relationships change. The last time I saw my great-grandma Claudine. She was 98 and had horrible dementia. She didn't recognize my grandmother, her daughter, and it was honestly very sad. We were going to her house because my papa, her husband, died and we needed to go to his funeral. Before we left we got a car wash and one of the guys there gave us a red carnation. It was a weird promotion or something I think. But after a 10+ hour drive we made it to her house. I rushed inside and overheard my grandma begging my great-grandma to remember her because my grandma had recently been diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. She kicked its ass and beat it. I gave her a second and knocked, then walked in. The very first thing my great-grandma said when she saw me was, "Is that my beautiful my name?" I nearly cried just from that. My grandma was super happy she remembered me, but sad she didn't remember her, and decided I should spend time with her alone. She went off to go get some food I think, but I don't really know. So it was just me and my grandma. We chatted for a while and the inevitable question finally came up. Me, who was that woman in here earlier? That's your daughter, Grandma? Oh really? Why does her hair look so weird? Oh, it's a wig. She is bald now. I couldn't bring myself to tell her daughter had cancer, even thought she wouldn't remember. She giggled a bit then attempted to pull me in and said I'm gonna steal her wig. I laughed. She couldn't walk or lift her own arms on her own, let alone snatch a wig right off of my grandmother's head. After about an hour my tummy started to grumble, so I called my grandma back in and went to the kitchen for some potatoes. After maybe 5 minutes I heard my grandma scream. I was afraid my great-grandma finally had died and rushed in, but it wasn't that at all. My great-grandma did it. She ripped the wig right off of my grandma's head. She told her to come close to whisper a secret, and with all her might snatched it. She went on to live in a care home, and got into many more antics, and would call once a week begging me to steal her away, and start a traveling band. Edit. Holy crap, wow. I went to sleep, and woke up with all of these amazing messages and awards. Thank you all so much for enjoying. What a great memory. I screamed when she snatched your grandma's wig. All 4 of my grandparents passed before I could introduce my husband to them, and that always makes me feel sad. We use my granny's candlestick for Shabbos every Friday, and I like to think she'd be delighted to hear that. The first that I know of, and last time my dad told me he loves me. He suppresses his emotions with brute force, so I highly doubt I'll hear it again. I worked as a homeless street outreach worker for a couple years. My coworker and I saw a guy standing near a river. We felt something wasn't right and parked. My coworker and I convinced the person that killing themselves isn't worth it. A few weeks later, that person confronted my coworker and thanked him for being there that night. That person had found an apartment and felt that their life was finally gotten on track. My husband and I have a habit of touching feet when we sleep, a nice cute comfort thing, because cuddling in your sleep is just impractical and sweaty. Once we were napping in the study on the inflatable mattress. We were head to toe because I was trying to use my phone while charging it. We fell asleep, and I woke up and instinctively reached my toes to his toes. I heard a muffled hey because I forgot we were head to toe and shoved my feet around his head instead. It's been 10 years and I still laugh thinking about it. Pretty sure it was a dream or something I imagined. I remember walking down a dirt road with heavy swamp vegetation. Weeds mostly, growing on both sides, and dense tree branches hanging over the road around 10 AM in the end of June, with patches of sunshine barely making it to the dirt below. I was a kid and was walking with a friend. It's where I go when I need to calm down, if I remember it. Me remembering the last time I saw my mom alive. She was sitting in her chair where she existed for 90% of her last couple of years, watching Netflix and YouTube. I hugged her exactly 6 days before she died. I'm sorry for your loss. Watching my aunt make tamales with her sisters and mom on Christmas Eve. She was so happy, and it was when she was at her best, laughing and smiling. Fun times. I miss her a lot. Edit. Wow, thank you for the 2K+ upvotes. I'm new to Reddit, and I appreciate the responses on this thread. That's really lovely. Me and my wife had one of those weddings that was hard earned and had everybody who was there rooting for us to make it. When it finally happened, the joyous energy in the room everyone had for us could not have been any more perfect. My then 5-year-old daughter dancing with my husband at our wedding. Her biological dad was never in the picture. To see the two of them dance at our wedding had me ugly crying. My sister has severe anxiety and depression. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. My husband and I were to dance to the song Tightrope from The Greatest Showman. As we walk onto the dancer floor, the DJ announces this will be our first dance, but I don't think they know that this is a recording from Sister. My sister recorded herself singing the song, which she didn't know we had picked, while a friend played piano for us to dance to. I cried a lot on my wedding day, all happy, but nothing made me cry harder than that. I'm crying now just remembering it. She told me after how hard it was for her to get up the courage to sing it, to record it, everything it involved, but she loved me and wanted to give me something special. This will never not make me cry. And now we have onion ninjas spraying people because of that story. Honestly, I played baseball for 10 years, all the way from little league to high school. My first several years I was great, hitting the ball, catching fly balls, stealing bases. The whole nine. My father was always so proud of me. I could tell he was really invested in my games. He never missed a single one. Every single game my dad would take me out for ice cream afterwards, and when I did something especially great, we would split a banana split. I'll never forget the day when I first struck out. I fucked up bad, costed a game. I was so hard on myself. I was so scared to see the look of disappointment in my dad's face, because he always called me his star player. I sat on the other side of the bench, away from the bleachers, and was barely able to focus through the last half of the final inning. After we ran the field, and told the rest of the players good game, I was afraid to make eye contact at the gate. While I was leaving I looked up, afraid, to see my dad smiling ear to ear. He wrapped his arms around me, and picked me up, and told me I was still his star player. I asked if we could still split a banana split. Instead of having to share, we each got our own. I got extra fudge. I'll never forget how much we laughed that night together. He taught me that failure isn't something to fixate on, but something to learn from. He taught me that failure doesn't have to be scary. He taught me that it was a necessary part of life to make someone better. He taught me that everyone makes mistakes, even big ones, and that the biggest part of failure is to always have compassion. We've had a really hard life, separately and together, but I'll never share a banana split with anyone else. Edit. Thank you for the award, kind stranger. Dude, you gave me tears. My wife was my blind date to senior prom. I'd have to say that my first time seeing her is a memory that always makes me smile. That or when she said yes to a second date. Or when she said yes to marrying me. Basically my wife in general. Edit. Figured I'd share a little backstory. My original date to prom cancelled on me. My plan was just to go by myself and hang out with my friends. However, my best friend's mom heard that I didn't have a date and decided to set me up. She asked one of her co-workers if her daughter would be interested in going on a blind date to prom, and her daughter said yes. Now, we had never met each other because she didn't go to the same school as me. She was actually homeschooled due to medical reasons. She's had seizures her whole life and had to drop out of school because of how bad they were getting. On a side note, she's been seizure free for several years now. This would probably be her only chance to go to a prom of any kind. So she decided to give it a shot. Lucky for me, we met up at my best friend's house. We decided to double date so that she didn't feel uneasy. She, my friend, and his girlfriend knew each other already. I remember the first thought I had when she walked through the door, which was, this girl is way too pretty for me. I felt like she was way out of my league. Turns out she thought I was pretty handsome too. That night was one of the best nights of my life. The next day I called her and asked if she'd want to go on another date, and she said yes. A few years later, and we were married. We've been together now for over 10 years. Or what? There's a few, but one is super heartwarming to me. For context, my grandparents were always super religious and fairly old-fashioned, but they were cool with it. If they saw something they didn't like, you know what they'd do? They'd give you a smile, tell you to have a good life, in a sweet way, and go on their way. One day, as most little kids do, I drew a picture. It was of an alien on Earth saying "Wowee, I'm on Earth." I gave it to my grandpa. Instead of throwing it away and lecturing me about the Bible like most people I knew would, he hung it up on the wall next to his side of the bed. It was still there, around 10 years later, when he died. It was still there, around 4 to 5 years after his death, when grandma died. My stupid little drawing, drawn by a little kid, and given to a person who cold thrown it away, was put in a place of honor for the majority of the time I knew my grandparents. I'm crying right now. I'm gonna have to go up there and see if it's still there and ask if I can have it. Make sure you frame it and keep it around. Reading this really made me think of my grandparents now and the unconditional love they always show me. Thank you. Well, I was hitting a real low point and my friend invited me over. I still had all these thoughts in my head until she opens the door and her big ass Siberian husky jumps on me and starts to lick my face. I started giggling and literally all my worries went kaput. Jeez, man, I really feel down. I hope she is that barking. Where the it's coming right for MR. Yo, I feel that when my dog passed everything after just sent me somewhere. Hit a major low, ran into a dog that looked exactly like mine. Not just same breed but same features, and it was so excited to see me. Was what I really needed at the time. My father was diagnosed with brain cancer and given a few months to live. He beat the odds again and again, and the memory of him and my mother dancing at my wedding will always make me smile. He was supposed to be dead so many times before that. I lost my dad to brain cancer in 2006. He had a couple of surgeries that gave him a year instead of just 6 months from when he was diagnosed in 2005. When he had surgery to try and remove the tumor, we all knew that he might not make it and he might not be the same at all afterwards. We get the news from the doc that he made it through surgery and see him being wheeled from the operating room to the recovery room. We meet eyes for a brief moment and he furrows his brow like, who the hell are you? And when he sees my worried reaction, he laughs and says, got ya. Cancer eventually took his life, but it couldn't take his sense of humor. Probably qualifying for state in wrestling. No one expected me to win that match. Glad it ended for you that way. My coach always said that, even though it's just high school, you'll remember it forever. He wasn't wrong. Riding my bike with my childhood friends around the neighborhood in the summer. Carefree living, and my favorite of all memories. Mine would be when I first started talking to my so. I had been asking co-workers about her for some time, and then I found out that she was asking about me as well. We would talk here and there, but I never had the guts to ask her on a date. When I finally built up the courage to ask her out on a date, she was saying yes before I even asked. We were laughing like schoolgirls because I literally only asked if I could ask her something pointed. Makes me smile because I always had low self-esteem and underestimated how much I was worth in a sense of what I could bring to the table in a relationship. Having her love and support just makes me so incredibly happy now, and that memory just stands out during the good and the hard times. This is so sweet. I've gotten a cavity. You should tell her how you fondly think back to this. Now I feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Also lonely. Can I ask you something? Yes, OMG. What's so funny? I said yes, you could ask me something. This makes me feel so happy just thinking of you guys. Good for you, and I hope you guys have a beautiful life together. No, you will have a beautiful life together. This made me smile too, seeing my niece come into the world. She was the promised treasure, child of surprise at the end of my depression rainbow. I had lost my mom 4 years and really struggled. Suddenly, this little girl comes along. Even looked like my mom too. I remember holding her in the dark part of the delivery room and her opening her little eyes for the first time. The day my first son was born, his eyes were closed the first few minutes, even after being handled by his mom and doctors. Suddenly he opened his eyes, and I was the first person he'd ever seen before. It was love at first sight. I love telling him that story to this day. That's wonderful to hear. My son is almost 7 weeks old, and I'm just now getting the first big smiles. It's pretty great. I was 9. It was my first time visiting Disney and holidaying in the States. Living in the tropics, I couldn't get used to the cold summer nights of California, you read that right, and came down with a mild fever. Was rather down after realizing I wasn't going to be able to catch the fireworks display, so my dad snuck me out when my mum was busy looking after my brother. He carried me to the castle, where I saw fireworks for the first time in my life. He even indulged me further and let me go on some rides before that. Thanks, Dad. When my daughter was little, she literally could not stop talking. She has ADHD and that's just one of the effects. One day, we were walking by an abandoned lot, looked like an old gas station or something. My daughter looked at it and said, "Wow, that's a beautiful yard." I said, "That's a lot." She said, "Yeah. A lot of beautiful yard." Reminds me of my younger brother years ago, a tad displeased with the hardness of his bicycle seat. My mother then tells him it'll be just fine, it needs padding. My brother then proceeds to pat the bicycle seat with his hand thinking it required patting. English having so many words that sound the same for different things is never-ending laughs with little kids. My son's best one was when he was about 3 and had kicked off his shoes for the millionth time in the car after my asking him not to. This night it was raining, and I said, "Fine. You'll just have to walk through the rain in your bare feet then." After a pause he says, "But mummy, I don't got bare feet. I got skid feet." It was so cute. "This is so precious, please give your daughter a hug from me." Okay, but she deserves the world. The first time my best friend told me she loved me, platonically. I grew up in rough household and never really heard that before. Happy cake day op. Thank you. I hope you enjoy your weekend. How amazing my ex-boyfriend was to me. I have the same thing. No one likes to talk about that, so I don't mention it to anyone I know, but I think I'd do anything if he wanted me back. But I still have those memories of being cute idiots together, and I always remind myself that some people never get to experience the kind of love I've had. Why ex then? First time in Vegas. You can't tell us the story though. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. My first and only time in Vegas, I went with some of my gaming buddies who I had only known online for years. We had a great time. When I first met my online bestie Irel, we ran at each other and hugged. I couldn't stop hugging them from how happy I was to see them. I also stole their jacket and wore it at one point, and I have a picture of that, and it makes me smile so much. During a family reunion, a bunch of house were sitting on an L-shaped couch near the kitchen. The rest of the family was in the kitchen. About 15 to 20 people in the area. My pregnant sister lets out a silent fart and then says woo. Then the other 6 or so people on the L couch get up from the awful smell almost instantaneously. Then the rest of the family looks over and wonders why everyone but my sister is off the couch screaming bloody murder, and my sister is just laughing, and her face is glowing red with embarrassment. The kicker though was she was only 2 or 3 months pregnant, so she didn't tell everyone. It was out of wedlock and we are Irish Catholic, so ick now. So she just said I ate a lot cheese. Oh man. IF love that story. Edit. A bunch of US asterisk I really need to proofread. My BF sleep taking. In the middle of the night I hear, BF, what are you doing? BF, it's a duck. I don't think ducks go BF. Thinks for a moment it's a crazy duck. Or last night. I love it. What do you love? BF. I love it. I love you. BF. Gets really serious. I love you too. So damn sweet. I miss telling my girl this. Time to heal. But you and your BF are awesome. It's such a pure story to hear. Thanks for the share. Meeting my best friend for the first time. We have known each other for 4 years now, and it was amazing to finally meet her in person. We met on Minecraft and still talk every day. Family vacations with my dad's side of the family. But we don't do them anymore. Getting my dog. I was only 10 and was immediately in love. I have a picture of me holding her right after we got her, and I always smile when I see it. I wanted a dog all my life, lived in a small apartment with my mother, and for my 9th birthday, I woke up to all of my family singing happy birthday to me, and a dachshund puppy licking my face. I cried from happiness. It would have to be the first time that I told my current girlfriend that I loved her. It happened not long before we started dating, and it was me, my girlfriend and her best friend drinking, and after a few hours of drinking, joking around and just having a good time, I ended up with my head in my girlfriend's lap while she was running her fingers through with my hair, and while she was doing that I looked up at her and said, "I'm in love with you." Fast forward 10 months, and I still get butterflies in my stomach whenever I see her, and I've made sure to tell her at least once a day that I love her so much and that she's absolutely stunning. My girlfriend in high school decided to dress up as a dinosaur for Halloween. She wore a black hoodie and cut a witch's hat to make a tail. She covered herself in polka dots and was so happy to be a dinosaur. We were walking through the neighborhood and she would stop like every 10 steps to wiggle her tail. We have been together for 10 years, and that memory always makes me grin. Last year I was in Walmart one day. Little boy comes walking in the store with his mom. Very hyperactive, screams at the top of his lungs the moment he gets in the store. Marco, random old man who happens to walk by, yells back, "Polo, pretty entertaining to see." I worked at a restaurant. I walked in just as the dishwasher tried to clean off the ice cream scoop with cookie dough on it by shooting it with the handheld sprayer. The jet of water hit the curved part of the scoop and shot right back at her. She was saying something when she did it and got a good blast of wet cookie dough in her mouth and face. She gave herself quite a bath and was embarrassed but also laughing. We all had a good laugh about it. When mum told me that to get back at dad's mum, who's an asshole, she took some dog shit, froze it, and then delivered it to her house as an Christmas present. She said by the time it defrosted and is under the Christmas tree, she won't know where the stench of crap is coming from. Almost every summer, I lifeguard at this camp with another lifeguard around my age. We dick around a lot before the pool opens for the day, sometimes even waking up early, just so we could take turns swimming for a little while. A couple years ago, we'd just closed down the pool for the campers, and as per usual, began fooling around. Somewhere down the line, she found a busted up lawn chair and decided to sink it to the bottom of the deep end. We kept it weighed down with a few cinder blocks and posed with it underwater, just the typical stuff like pretending to sit in it or holding on to the armrests and acting like we were doing handstands. She had a waterproof phone case on her cell or something too, so she was able to snap a few pictures while we were down there. I know it wasn't anything groundbreaking, but it was the most fun I'd had in a while. There were lots of laughs and shenanigans during our time there, but that day holds a special place in my heart. I catch myself thinking back to that day a lot, especially since the quarantine's got me feeling kind of depressed. It never fails to put a grin on my face and a spring in my step. I love getting to hang out with her when I can. We don't really see each other that much apart from lifeguarding together over the summers, so I'm really hoping the camp isn't cancelled because of all this. Last August, I loaded some camping gear onto the back of my bicycle and left my home in Wisconsin with the goal of riding to Seattle and down the Pacific coast. I was 20 years old when I started that trip and still lived at home with my mom and older brother 3 months after I left. It was coming up on Thanksgiving. On top of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, my birthday is also in early December, and my mom's birthday is less than a week after mine. I realized I could spend my 21st birthday partying with strangers in a hostel, which is not my kind of thing at all, or alone in the woods in my tent, which doesn't sound like a bad birthday to me, but maybe not for my 21st. So I